Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and welcome to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from meta development and news and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and this also is uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu. Today, I'm joined with my co-host Teddy, and we're going to be talking about how Bandai can improve their organized play. So, I guess first things first, we should probably start with the meta, because that's usually a good hot topic. So we did have a couple of events happen. I think it was Latin America and Oceania. They had their regionals. Little on the small side, but we still have some data to pull from it.
Oh yeah, let's see. So, let's see. This is Latin America, and I mean it's pretty small. Yeah, the data is quite small. And this is just top. This is all of it, literally.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Latin America, they only had about 72 players. It was an online regional. We have the top 8 breakdown. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to incorporate this into the usual data to compile everything because there's not really a whole lot here to go off of. The biggest takeaway is Bloomlord won. There was only 5 rounds, probably because there was a decent amount of ties with second, third, and fourth all tying. But Bloomlord took it, and everything else outside of Grandis making it into top 8 is kind of exactly what I would think this meta looks like. No Beelzemons, but we don't know what the spread is, so we can't really say much about that.
I think it's hilarious that there's not a single Beelzemon in the top of this list. I wonder if that's just the due to the amount of players, or if it was just maybe a collective they just didn't want to see it, or some weird thing. I doubt that's the case, but it's very interesting to not see a single one in the top 8.
Yeah, and I highly doubt that Bloomlord splashing in Quartzmon
Is
is
enough.
that scary enough to deter people from playing Beelzemon. So I don't exactly know what's going on there. But
I mean,
yeah.
Grandis, Blue Flare. I mean, Blue Flare's still pretty solid. But seeing
Well, with
both
two
Bloom and
Bloom
Grandis.
Lords, yeah, with 2 Bloom Lords in the top, there's no wonder why Blue Flare wouldn't be able to make it into the top because that deck just
Yeah, they eat
farms
them
it.
alive. Yeah, that's pretty funny though. I'm happy that this is like the first one we look at because it's actually like this is pretty cool. This would be hilarious if this was like ours, and then we shift gears and go to the Oceania one, and then
Yes.
it's a little bit more
This is more what
normal.
we actually would expect.
Yeah.
It still was a really small event, only 80 players. And what won was security control. Was security control doing anything spicy? No, it was literally just
No, it was just a
security
generic one.
control. The spiciest thing was the return of Digimon Emperor. Just
I
because
think
it's good into low level aggression decks.
Yeah, it really hurts a lot against the Hunters matchup slash the even the Beelzebub matchup because they just want to move out their Impmons a lot of the time, swing without with an Impmon early in the game so they can mill. So people, I mean, I know I don't, I see these lists, but I've been seeing that more and more, especially on my locals recently. One of my friends plays it, and he's been on this for a long time now, so I knew it was a matter of time.
Yeah,
I mean, man, I'm even seeing the Swarce in this. That's
it's
pretty cool too.
yeah, it's good to see that All Force is still making it into the top. I think literally All Force, if it sees the nuts,
Oh yeah,
it can do some really powerful and devastating things. I think what's really keeping it back is it can't necessarily find its pieces super quickly, but it's still a very strong deck nonetheless. But literally outside of Security Control, there was a blue flare that was able to make it in top 16 in Oceania. And then everything else we've kind of already just seen. Like, there's not really anything developing in the meta, actually. And there is just more of a consolidation on the decks that we are seeing.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think we'll probably be in the same consistent like view where we see the same top 4 decks for the most part. I don't think that'll change very much. Maybe we'll see the outliers here and there where somebody like an Old Force draws the nuts every game and does good. Not saying the person wasn't good or anything of that nature, but um, it's one of those decks where if you don't hit pieces, you just lose very hard. And seeing like these other decks are a little bit more consistent. So I mean, even like well, we do have a Jessmon in here too. To be fair, so can't really say nothing about there. But there's, I'm not surprised about seeing anything on this besides the Old Force and the Jessmon. I do like seeing them though. They do make me kind of happy.
I mean, it's nice to see that people are still playing other decks than what's like the known meta. But as far as like taking a look at the actual current state of the meta, looking at all of the big top 16s that we can actually gather. Sorry, Latin America, you just don't provide the data for me to actually include you. Plus, your event was kind of on the too small side where I reasonably couldn't include you. Granted, North American data is too large and should probably be separated from everyone else, but I just like to get a solid grasp and understanding on, like, this is more of a where the meta is more than this is, like, concrete, hardcore definition, the meta, period. So right now we see that there's only 11 decks that have topped so far. That's really small. The meta's not over yet, so there's still chances for other decks to top, but based on these numbers, it's not looking super great. Beelzemon obviously is the number one deck out of the 3 major events with top 16s. It is making up nearly 40%, which actually is getting into the unhealthy territory. We haven't seen a deck dominate this much since literally BT7. BT7 with blue hybrids, that is literally the closest comparison we had. I don't think Beelzemon is tier 1. I just think that Beelzemon is the most played deck and therefore has the highest chances of winning. Second best deck is Hunters. Third, Bred Hybrids. Fourth, Cross Hearts. More specifically, the Cross 7 variant. We'll get into that in just a moment. Then we had War Greymon, Blue Flares, Black War Greymon, Security Control, All Force Machine Dramon, and the only deck I'm actually going to label as Got Lucky is Yellow Hybrids.
No, that's a good player. Don't ever say that. I love that guy. Whoever that is, I love you.
I'm not judging the player. I'm just saying I don't know the matchups, and based on what he was playing against, he could have had an easier ride into the top slots. Like, if you don't see some of the bad matchups, then you're going to be obviously in a better position. Like, if he just dodged every single Beelzemon and never saw one, and just farmed...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and he just farmed all of his good matchups, which I don't know what Yellow Hybrid's good matchups would be. Granted, we know he was playing a more control-orientated deck, but still.
That's my hero.
Yeah.
I grew up to be... I want to be just like him when I grow up. I love it. I mean, I don't mind seeing stuff like that every now and then. The outliers are cool to see.
No, I always love seeing the outliers because that shows what is still possible with this format. Unfortunately, right now we kind of have this consolidation between like 5-6 decks that is like actually truly playable, and then everything outside of that is just literally getting gatekeeped. So I kind of went through and I did some average on numbers, and any event you're likely to see about 23% of the decks being Beelzemon. And with Beelzemon having that high of representation because the next most prominent deck is Hunters, I think when I ran the numbers, Hunters was at like 15% of any given event. Like, that was just the average percentage of Hunters players there were. Those are two very powerful and very dominating decks, making up like 45, almost 50% of the meta, outside of the other top decks as well, which is War Greymon, Red Hybrids, Black War Greymon, Machine Dramon, and then representation wise, the very last deck that was doing well was Cross Hearts. Those are literally the decks people are playing, and if you're not playing those decks, you're having a very hard time taking whatever rogue deck to try to combat those decks.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're gonna be like that for a bit, where if you can't deal with these top four decks, you kind of just can't hang, essentially. Um, and I mean, it's always kind of been that way. I mean, there'll always be that one deck that just shuts down the other majority of decks, or even if it's not just one, multiple. In this case, we got a solid 4 or 5 that just are vastly better than just about all the other decks, and I think by a good margin as well.
You're not wrong. I've collected and looked at the data long enough to know that usually each format has about 2 to 6 decks that are actually playable, and then the others are like just fringe. But the fact that the just fringe still were able to top, and this time they're not, just shows how much gatekeeping the decks that aren't Beelzemon but still are playable are like shutting out the rest of the format. And
Yeah,
that's kind of something we really haven't seen a lot of. Like the closest comparison is unfortunately BT7, which data wise was the actual worst format in the entire game, where you literally played one of 2 decks, and if you didn't play those 1 or 2 decks, you just were not even playing the game, which was Blue Flare and Yellow Hybrid. So basically, Blue Flare this time around is Beelzemon, and Yellow Hybrid is those aforementioned decks, like Red Hybrids, War Greymon, Cross Hearts, that are playable, but not as good as obviously Beelzemon.
and when he says that, he means blue hybrid. Just so we're on that same wavelength. But it. I mean, yeah, that's you sum it up pretty much on point. There really isn't much to say in regards to that, just because it'll if your deck cannot deal with these top 5 decks, which most of them cannot. Actually, almost all of them cannot. Anything under these really have a hard time dealing with these top 5. It's you're not having the best time unless you get a little bit lucky and maybe you dodge your worst matchups. Like if that yellow hybrid player dodged, I think the yellow hybrid player doesn't do bad. I remember seeing a post on Facebook about like the player himself, and he was talking about some matchups, and he said he didn't mind the Beelzebub matchup that much. It was really the War Greymon matchup that he didn't like because tamer removal, duh.
Right.
And the Hunters matchup also, but he didn't have that. He was saying he wasn't that bad as long as he was conservative with his resources. So I think in this case, he just dodged all the matchups that would suck for him: Machine Dramon, Black War Gray, and then War Gray, and then he kind of just and probably to a lesser extent Red Hybrid, and then he was able to just do all right as long as he played good. So I think there are going to be cases like that all the time. There will always be outliers of somebody finding the one thing or someone wanting to do something dramatically different that people aren't prepared for. I'm sure those Beelzemon players had no idea what the heck was going on
I
when
honestly
they were
think
playing
as a
against.
Beelzemon player, you wouldn't care. You just would
Probably
try
would
to
not.
set up Beelzemon X and just rip their security asunder.
Thing is, they could just then if that's what they have to do, then they just heal. They spam heal, get themselves over 5 security, and then what can realistically, you just keep controlling the board. And what can Beelzebub really do when you're able to consistently keep yourself over 3 to 4 security?
I think Beelzemon in that type of matchup would probably have to understand the amount of heal that they're trying to do, except the yellow hybrid player wasn't running a whole lot of heal. They were more focused about DP reduction and control. So they were just trying to control the fields better and sacrificed having more
They had a bit
recovery
more aggression.
options. Yes. They were more aggressive, more controlling, and they weren't as hardcore focused on recovery because I think they understood that decks like Beelzemon, decks like Red Hybrids, even decks like War Greymon, they could just dump on the damage, ignore security, none of it actually matters, and they could get over whatever amount of DP they need to, and just your security is irrelevant. So you might as well just have a way to actually try to fight back against those decks with the cards that you're actually running inside of your deck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Also, Venusmon is a broken card.
oh yeah, I mean, Venusmon alone probably hard carried a good chunk of these security control slash yellow hybrid players, any of them, just because of how absurdly strong that effect is. I mean, a blanket just turn off all effects is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like security control's only saving grace at this point is probably more so Venusmon rather than the recovery and control package. Although the taxing also can get pretty annoying, but
Yeah,
some
those
of the decks
cars
can
are.
play around it.
Yeah, now at least nowadays, yeah, those like the top decks can definitely just bypass the Karis, even the
Uh,
Mimis, to be honest.
yeah, but the fact that out of a lot of the top decks, the last meta's Darling has dropped so hard off the map, is kind of surprising and not surprising at the same time. You'd think that a lot of people would still be super hyped and jazzed about Cross Hearts, considering it also got support in the form of Cross 7 Superior, and technically the Merva build does have access to Jet Mervamon if they really wanted to. So it's not like the deck got any worse, and it's not like the matchups got dramatically that much worse for the deck either. It's just the popularity of some of the other decks and the speed is what's more appealing to a lot of the players, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like there's like barely any representation
No,
for this deck,
it literally fell off the face of the earth.
and it's crazy because the deck is still very good. Like against most of these matchups below, even against like Beelzemon, it's not the worst. Like it's still a pretty decent matchup as long as you are trying, as long as you're drawing okay and you keep pace with them. Like you can out damage them fairly easily. So I find it very interesting. Now it does take a little bit more setup. So sometimes you won't have the time necessarily to set up all your tamers because they'll just kill you before that. But like the other decks, you could get away with playing maybe not so much red hybrid unless you could just set up blockers, a lot of them. But like hunters, you can deal with Wargrey, you can deal with to a lesser extent. You don't want to play against this matchup, but you can deal with it.
No, Tamer decks really don't like Wargrey, Black Wargrey, or now to a lesser extent Machine Dramon. But it's really interesting the fact that everyone was so jazzed about Cross Merva last format. It performed just as well as Cross 7, and now this format, it seems like Cross 7 is doing better than Merva when Merva is the more faster aggressive deck, which if you're trying to play on pace with Beelzemon, you would assume that would be the deck people are going to be playing against if you were to be a Cross Hearts player. But the fact that Cross 7 is doing better, I think because it's the consistencies there, because you don't need to search out your options which aren't searchable, and Cross 7, almost all of the pieces in the deck are searchable. So that could be a reason why maybe the consistency's higher, even though the ceiling is the aggressive ceiling is higher on Merva.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be a deck can be aggressive, have a massively aggressive turn, but if they can't get to that point consistently, then it doesn't matter. Like, makes no difference if they can kill you if they can never get to that point to kill you.
Right. And I think just having like a big body that comes out of nowhere and then you have a secondary Hail Mary play is like really appealing for cross 7 over cross Merva.
Oh, yeah, a big body that nukes something on the board, and then if they do deal with it, then you have the other big body that also doesn't nuke it, but it bottom decks that and all the sources.
Yeah, I
Like,
think that all the
that's
sources
pretty
part
good.
really matters because against stuff like Machine Dramon, where it's just like they could just sit on this ginormous body, it really gives you a good way to fight back against them.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that it literally shuts down Machine Dramon. Like, you just auto win because when they hard play Machine, they're like, "Yeah, I'll end my turn." Then you just X7 Superior and bot deck the Machine Dramon and all the sources they just put under, and there's nothing they can do to prevent it because it doesn't trash the sources. It bottom decks all the sources first, then it tries to bottom deck the Machine Dramon or the Chaos Dramon, whatever it is. So there's no way to protect against it. So I love it. I think it's one of my favorite cards that come out of the set. Even though, oh man, that card got hurt real bad. The market was not nice to that card.
No, and like speaking of Machine Dramon, a lot of people really like to hype up Machine Dramon, and I think Machine Dramon is a fine deck. Don't get me wrong, but they're like it theoretically has the tools to handle almost everything, but for some reason um there's a reason why it's not performing as well as it probably should or could be. The ceiling for Machine Dramon's insanely high, but Machine Dramon has two big problems when taking a deck into an event that a lot of these other top decks don't really have. The first point is consistency. Machine Dramon still is a relatively inconsistent deck. It has a whole bunch of different ways to be able to draw cards on its low end. I know a lot of people are starting to look at the Numamon Jerrymon package. So that way they have level 4s that they could just hard play and start drawing off of, and the potential to evolve for cheap too. So, like, that's pretty appealing, and it looks like it's only helping the deck, but the deck is still just bringing up to the second point, too slow for events. Like, you'll have a 30-minute game 1. If you don't win that game 1, then you're going to be, looking at another 30-minute game 2, and then literally go into time. If you don't win, then you just straight up lose. If you do win that second game, then you're looking at for sure a tie possibility. So most of the time when you're playing Machine Dramon, you're going to be either A, tying, or B, losing, and those aren't two good options that you generally want to take. I mean, granted, if you win game 1, you're obviously going to try to stall out game 2. But is that really the position you want to be in when you're playing in an event?
Listen, I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to sit there and play a full 50-minute round just to get a win or a loss and then tie the next one or lose the next. So it's like, that's just like it. I think where Machine Dramon is hurt at the current moment is that there's no real specific support for the deck. Like, we just got with BT11 the Analog Man and the Machine Dramon. But then, if you think about it, the only real line Machine Dramon got was from EX1. It still doesn't have a a secondary full line that you can use that directly supports the deck. It has plenty of options because of its effect to use any level 5 machine or cyborg, black or red, and then etc. with the new machine or new chaos. But there's no like specific support. Like, we didn't get, like, even in this set BT11, even though it got the tamer and the level 6, it didn't get a full line to be like, yes, this is supposed to specifically help with this. This does whatever Machine Dramon is missing right now. It still does not have that. So I think until that happens and we stop getting these little dribbles of stuff, the deck will just kind of just be this dark horse where it's like always in the back burner, and it's always something you have to think about, but it's not something you should really realistically worry about all that much because it's just not consistent to play in a long term event. Like, there's too much variance in 8 rounds of going back through 8 rounds of 3 games, and it will never ever consistently work for you. Unfortunately, I mean, if it does, you got a really good day, and I'm very happy for you if you did. I love the deck very much, and I love Machine and Chaos Dramon as Digimon. Period, but it needs a bit of love in terms of an actual line and not just a level 5. We have plenty of level 5s to choose from, but we need like a way to build efficiently into said line that isn't unoptimal, like me using Garamons and using using the Numemons that have no inheritable sources or anything like that. So it's just like that's what you have to do to make the deck even function normally. You have to do
Yeah.
things like that, and that makes no sense. If you look at every other deck here, they all have functioning lines. The only one that doesn't in every single list that I'm looking through here is literally Machine Dramon.
Yeah, I do think having a dedicated low end is only going to be for the deck's benefit, and right now, because it doesn't, it's just playing with whatever tools it could muster to have a semblance of a low end. Like, you have Dorumon and Dorimon as basically your draw engine and memory engine to try to make things cheaper. Were those cards designed for it? No. It's cool that it could work with them, but if there was a machine card that could have like an on-play searcher for machines and cyborgs, that would definitely help out the deck a lot, especially like another when digivolving that could help interact with level 5s to make the level 5s better. Like, yeah, with a good low end, I do think Machine Dramon could be better. But until then, this is kind of what he's got, and even though he's got a lot to work with in terms of the top end, the low end is still a little bit left to be desired, but that doesn't mean that the deck is bad. Obviously, it's still doing well enough, and I'll save a lot of Machine Dramon players like some heartache in terms of like, if you really want to understand how you beat some of those fast aggro decks when you know your deck is going to be slow, just sit on a Chaos Dramon, sit on 2 Analog Mans, and you're good to go. Will you end up losing to Hunters? Yes, but that's just the risk you take because you have to. Like, you can't avoid that, but that's how you win all of the aggro matchups. And a lot of these top decks kind of do have that like rock paper scissors dynamic where it's just like, yeah, you are good against this but bad against this, good against this but bad against that. And like, obviously what's making Beelzemon so good, as we saw from some of the data last week, is the fact that he really doesn't have any hardcore negative matchups. I'd say Machine Dramon is probably the worst if they have the Machine Dramon set up, just because you can't kill their body. But if they don't have enough Analog Mans on the fields, like, you don't care. You could just out aggro them. They'll have 1, maybe 2 blocks, and you have the ability to trash security, multi-attack, restand, and flood the field. Like, sometimes you just don't care. And that's part of like what makes Beelzemon so good. And actually going deeper into that, in my opinion, what I think a lot of these decks are doing good is the fact that they are the best at removal and they are the best at having protections in some way, shape, or form. So they're hard to interact with, they hit hard, or their game plan is just solid enough to stonewall you out.
Yeah, I think that's probably where it's at the most. I agree there, where your deck either has to have an absurd high end, or I guess absurd payoff, like the Beelzemon deck, where they just kill themselves basically using the mill, and then when they hit that 20-30, they just automatically guaranteed, there's no way you can stop it, trash 2 to 3. And that's a massive payoff for not a lot of cost for them. And then you see things like Hunters, where all they have to do is set up a bunch of tamers, throw stuff under it, and they get to do that for free while also generating aggression. And then their payoff is Superior Mode, who can swing jamming twice, bottom, send something to the bottom of a tamer or another Digimon, nuke a board, while simultaneously checking security. I mean, it does a lot. Wargrey does the same, a big blocker with a bunch of protection. That can redirect attacks and then or block and then restand, so multi-blocker. I think all the big decks currently, and then of course like Emperor, and they just pure aggression. There's nothing you can do to stop it unless you can get out a bunch of blockers. But even then, They just use like Atomic Inferno, gain a bunch of memory for you blocking, and then still kill your thing because they'll be way higher DP than your stuff. So it's like every deck either has like an absurd explosive turn that there's just no way to swing the momentum back in your favor, or their power plays are so consistent that it's very hard for a deck that is not as consistent to keep up.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like screaming, "Oh, the game needs more interaction." And I just think we need more ways to be able to deal with some of the problems that currently already exist. So, like as an example, Beelzemon, one of the reasons why he is so powerful is because we can't stop him from milling. Not necessarily saying, oh, we need a card that says the opponent just can't mill, period, but having some form of like more ways to be able to interact with the opponent's trash, or as we've seen from some of the Japanese spoilers, literally the top of their deck, just having more ability to be able to manipulate the opponent's game plan definitely would help add to the basically rock, paper, scissors meta that a lot of these decks fall under. And the same can be true with what we were complaining with hybrids for a while. Oh, there's no real ways to deal and kill with tamers. And now tamers are starting to be able to revive themselves or have ways to be able to get them back. So there is a back and forth dynamic that took a little bit longer than it should, but is slowly forming between these, like, the cards that are hard to deal with and the strategies that are hard to deal with. So that's usually Bandai's MO, is they'll break something in one set and try to fix it in the next set or the subsequent set when they realize it's a problem. And I think the true is going to be said here. Quick hop over to some of the preliminary EX4 predictions. Based on the set, I really like. We're obviously going to go deeper into it probably next week, but just as like a good baseline before we shift gears into trying to figure out a better way for Bandai to host competitive play. Looking at EX4, I honestly don't think there's going to be a whole lot of like ground shaking changes. I think literally Blue Flares gets better, and then that's like the only competitive thing that's really changing. I think EX4 is still just going to be more BT12.
Yeah, I don't think it changes very much. I mean, we get the start of all the upgrades for the other decks like Mirage and Shine, but it still doesn't have the bigger payoffs. I think Shine will get a little bit more love than I think people are giving credit because Ruin mode is just that strong.
I mean, at least it
But
has a level 7 that it could use the Marcus with, which is what makes the BT12 Marcus so broken.
that's why I think it'll get. It's still missing, of course, another Marcus, so it's still gonna hurt in terms of consistency in that way. But I think it'll get some play. I think people will try it, and then they'll. I could see it having some success, just because of how absurd. Now they'll actually have two full lines, so they don't have to run the crappy Geo Greymons or these old ones from way back then that are just don't synergize at all with the deck. Now they can actually run two full lines that specifically are for the deck. And then also the payoff of the new Ruin mode. And Ruin mode is a house of a card. I think that card is so absurdly strong. So I think that might be the only thing that I think people are going to undervalue because I just think it's such a strong. I mean, Marcus is so absurdly strong. So, and I think Shine with Marcus and then going into a Ruin mode for free, swing with the Ruin mode, nuke itself so that you can hatch another egg, set up another thing in the back, and then pass the turn over. It doesn't matter what they do because now they can't do anything basically for the next turn. That is a now, of course, that's a very high end situation, but that is something I think that because of all the Greymon searching in the deck, I don't think it's that far fetched to consistently do. So I think that'd be the only thing that I would add to that because, of course, Blue Flare is getting a lot this coming set, and Blue Flare is going to be very strong. But other than that, I think you're 100% on the right. there's not enough in this set that really changes much. This is just like the preliminary extras for the decks that will start doing good come BT13.
Yeah. And BT13 isn't that far away. I really hate how they do EX sets, where EX sets are basically on their own cycle compared to normal BT sets. So we end up getting this dry spell of like 3 months of like nothing, and then we get 1 month blitzes. And I really wish they would just be like, look, we have two completely separate lines. Let's just release something every 2 months. Let's keep it consistent. Let's keep it easy. But no, they have two completely separate release schedules, and their own cycles for those products. I don't know exactly where these reboot boosters are full of the reprints and whatnot. I don't know what cycle that's going to be a part of, or if it's going to start its own news cycle. But whatever. That aside, the big topic of the day, outside of just all of the changes to the meta, which it's not really changing, is going to be Bandai's organized play. So we talked a lot about how we're not super happy with the current state of their organized play. So I decided to do some research. I believe Teddy did some research as well into other games' organized play structures to kind of figure out like what actually is wrong and where things are kind of falling apart and what they could potentially do better to be able to not necessarily fix the game. I think the game play-wise is fine. We have ups and downs in the metas. That's always normal. One good deck to rule them all. That's also still kind of normal, at least from my experience. But like getting into the nitty gritty of just why is organized play failing and what they could do to try to steer themselves on a better track. Because as we saw with the data that Eggman provided from Oceania and Latin America, their events are shrinking. They're not growing. The UK's, they're also on a decline, not as hard of a decline compared to some of their other past ones, but they are also shrinking. North America is the only one that hasn't been shrinking, and that's probably because we're the only ones that have invites, and they just started cutting the invites from store championships, so now the only way to get invites is at regionals, which puts more pressure and attention on regionals, even though the regional prizing sucks. Like, it is actually really bad, and it's only gotten worse over the years. And with this particular year, no other region has invites, and with the prizing being as bad as it is, there's less incentive for those other regions to play in the regionals. Because to them, they just go to nationals and sign up like any other tournament. It doesn't matter. Which I still don't understand why North America needs to be this special little thing where we're treated differently and we have invites. But I digress. So what kind of research did you do, Teddy?
Well, I basically just said I'm going to look at all of the different games that I'm aware of, at least that I have played back then, because it's really hard for me to talk on games I don't know much about, like, for example, Flesh and Blood and things like that. I'm just going to look at I looked at all the tournaments, how they function, like point system for like Pokemon and things like that. I wanted to see, even for example, I mean, Dragon Ball Super is a little bit the same, so we can't really
I mean, it's the same company.
go off that. So
Yeah.
we can't really base it off of that. But even looking at like Yu-Gi-Oh! And how they do YCSs and things like that, and it's Magic, and it's very weird, and it's a very loaded. How do I say it? It is a very loaded question to ask, because most of them kind of follow a similar structure where they have these tier one. I'll just use tiers for example because Yu-Gi-Oh uses them. Tier one, and these are like, hobby store level events, like your locals and things like that. And then they have like the tier two would be like the competitive events. These would encompass things like regionals and of those in like basically of those veins. I think Yu-Gi-Oh has them all under the same vein. Basically, all the competitive events are tier two, uh, where the Yu-Gi-Oh, the Championship Series, the Nationals, they have a whole bunch of different things, and then World Championship. So Yu-Gi-Oh is a little bit different in that regard because they have like four different things. They have regional qualifiers, and they have the Championship Series, they have the National Championship Series, World Championship qualifiers, and then actually World Championship. Whereas like we just have regionals, then Nats, then Worlds. So they add a little bit extra steps, but it's not too far off. So the only even they're like they don't have a point system in Yu-Gi-Oh or anything like that. You just you get into a certain placing in your YCSs, and then if you get into that within that placement, you get your invite and you go to the next level, and you keep doing that essentially over and over.
Yeah, because with Yu-Gi-Oh, from what I was trying to understand, it's like you could get a YCS invite, or no, you could get a WCQ invite from regionals or YCSs. So there's
Yes.
multiple different ways to be able to get your WCQ, which is the equivalent of our nationals. Where we, in comparison, there's only now one way to get it, and it's extra sweaty because I think with even at YCSs, invites go to top 32. Ours only go to top 16. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure their events are just as large as ours.
Their events are actually quite a bit larger for the most.
Yeah, so it makes sense for them to do top 32 because like it means a little bit more just based on the sheer amount of people. I mean, I wouldn't even say ours is that bad. Like 480 is still a very respectable number, and they should reasonably give out invites to top 32, especially since they took away store championship invites. Make it so that there's more opportunity to have invites if they care so much about invites. And then with the point based system, Pokemon's the only one that I know of that does point based systems. And you could earn your invite on a multiple different levels because of the point based system. So you're not just locked to specifically doing their regional championships, I think it is, because they have tiered stuff too, where it's just like you have your league challenge, then your league cups, then your regional championships, and then the big international championships, and then worlds.
Yeah, that's literally all of it actually. Yeah, I was just looking at it right now.
Yeah,
Um,
I wrote down
and
like some of their equivalents. So like their regionals would basically be the equivalent of our regionals. Then their international is the equivalent of our nationals. So like we're still missing that low level play that rewards you for the store champions. Or like just for playing in stores in general. Like outside of the prizing, which is nice for Digimon, the store championship prizing, don't get me wrong, is really nice this time around. The fact that I still am not incentivized to play in it is part of the problem. Like I'm not gaining anything from participating in that, and that's just sad. Even Yu-Gi-Oh, I think they still reward you with something for store level play. I know it's not a lot, but they at least try to reward. Oh, don't they have like points or something to?
yes, and for
Because you could
Pokemon.
get for Yu-Gi-Oh. Don't they
Oh
have
yeah.
like points
Hmm.
to give you buys or something?
Yep, they do.
Yeah, so like they're still rewarding you at the lowest level to try to incentivize you to compete in the higher levels. That doesn't exist in
And
Digimon.
and I think the pricing in Yu-Gi-Oh is also quite a bit better because like even local pricing is just better because like you get like alt arts for like Digimon, for example. We get like sometimes we get them and you have a small, but like Yu-Gi-Oh, like they have chase cards in those tournament packs and things like that, and and some of them are beautiful cards. So it's like,
I actually hate chase cards as like I hate the exclusive promos and whatnot that games will do for that type of stuff. The idea is to get them in the stores to participate, force them to do that if they want that card. So I understand like the business behind it. I hate it. But
as a person collecting the cards, yes, I don't enjoy it, but I think
it does
it
incentivize
it
store
doesn't
play though.
exactly. It does make it so that you do want to participate in as many of these, even just local tournaments as possible, so that you do get the chance. If you do pull it, sick. Now you have this super cool, and even like the non-chase cards, like there are just a lot of the tournament packs. They end up having like viable cards that just are usually expensive, but they're reprints and things like that. So it's their tournaments are, or at least their tournament packs tend to be a little bit more beneficial to just like the average player. Uh,
I mean, I
so
think Digimon's Prizing would be better if they gave us more relevant cards, because they'll like give us relevant cards when they're too late. It's just like, oh wow, this alt would have been great if we had it 3 months ago in the last format when people were actually playing the deck.
what was that? Oh my goodness, I remember. Oh god, it's gonna kill me.
They do it all the time. It's just like in just as an example, I have a butt ton of like double diamond official tournament pack sixes. It's just like, oh, here's Doru Greymon. It's just like cool.
Yeah,
That card was relevant
it's
before
like it's
the
banned.
limitation. Yeah. Or no, that wasn't. That was volume 6 was when BT9 was just over, or just beginning. So it's just like, yeah, the card got limited, and then we didn't need it anymore. Like some of their older ones, like as an example, the Double Diamonds Winter Pack. It's just like, cool. I am getting BT3 cards. Wow. Talk
That's the one
about
with
coming
what
late.
were the cards? Are they?
Like their winter pack for the double diamonds, just as an example, it's just like you get BT3 Stingmon, BT3 XVmon,
Yeah,
you get
like
BT1 or no BT2 Gardramon and BT1 Sirenmon. It's like talk about prize cards being completely irrelevant.
it's like, and then there was that one pack that they gave out that had like the adventure cast, and like none of them were good besides like the TK, the alter TK.
Oh, that was Tournament Pack Volume 3. It's just like, yeah, the tie is
It's
not
like
even the red tie, it's
it's
the
not even the
black
good one.
tie. Yeah. The Met I would say was pretty relevant. Mimi was pretty relevant. And then TK was relevant. And then the rest were literally garbage. And it's just
It's
like,
like,
why? Just
yes, these are
why?
nice looking, I guess, but they weren't even like they weren't foiled or they weren't anything like that, so they looked a little awkward. And none of the cards were usable. Literally, like 4 cards out of like what 15 around that
And
ballpark.
yeah, and that type of mentality carries over even to some of like literally the high level play stuff where it's just like, oh, here's Tournament Pack Volume 4. What are the usable cards in here? Cool. Out of the like 12 that they have, maybe 3 of them are playable. It's just like, why? Come on, just why? Just give us the good cards and you know what the good cards are. We
Yeah,
know you
exactly.
know they
It's like,
are.
come on, they're not stupid. That's why they made this reprint set. And like they know what cards are actually good and what cards are not.
Well, no, even in the reprint set, they put in some pretty questionable
Yeah, they had
choices.
some that were like, but a good chunk of those reprint cards are quite important cards for the meta. Now, mind you, they're very late. They're still very late on them. Like, but Magna Angemon is still amazing. Zord defeats. I mean, it's fine. It's a little late
Yeah,
now because no
but
one uses the card, but it's still a very good card.
yeah, but getting a little bit back on track. I used to play a lot of Magic, and I remember their tournament structure, which Flesh and Blood literally copied because it was pretty good. And they have a tiered based system too, where it is literally work your way up. So at tier 1, you have like your on demand events, your armory events, and then the play anywhere events. Those are just like the store level events. And then you use those to go up into your tier 2, or you could just jump into tier 2 if you really wanted to. with the Battle Hardened, ProQuest, and Road to Nationals. So that would be the equivalent of our regionals, which they usually run at least like one every month for various different locations. Then your tier 3 actually is the nationals, and then they have the calling, which is more for like being on the pro circuit in the pro tour, because at tier 4 with worlds they also do have a pro tour. So like we kind of see this like very similar structure where store play leads into regional play, which leads into national play, which leads into world play. And Digimon is currently kind of all over the place, where depending on where you live, that structure doesn't even matter, or it doesn't even apply. Which is why, like, I was, before playing Digimon, I was playing Bushiroad games. And Bushiroad, their events aren't as huge as some of the other big games, and they're probably not as huge as even some of the Bandai games. But the fact that they know that they're not huge allowed them to do something none of the other TOs are doing, or like companies, and that's make their events free. Like, you could go to a Bushiroad Springfest, and the only cost to you as a player is A, having your cards, which you should already have, and then B, travel. That's it. That is the only cost. You literally show up, they give you free stuff for playing, and then you just play and have a good time, and it's a good celebration. And then they have that's in the spring. Then they have a more competitive centric format for the fall, and they have a little circuit series. But like it's all super low stakes, and they don't really have like a good dedicated hardcore let's grind this out type of structure that a lot of the others have. And I've talked to a lot of Bushiroad players, and they're pretty content with literally free events with free prizing and just not trying to be super sweaty. But they still can be super sweaty if they want to.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Because I like the idea of free events, and I like that, you know, they can turn up the heat when they need to, or if they want to, basically. That's very interesting and very unique, because like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, just because I have a lot of more experience in that, more so than any other real card game besides maybe Pokemon, because I did play a good chunk of that. But like Yu-Gi-Oh is hyper competitive all the time. It doesn't matter. Even like the locals, for the most part, they're quite competitive all the time. So it's like there's no real like for fun formats unless you're playing like extra like different things like Edison format or Goat format. And even then, that's a whole different thing, and those are still highly competitive because people will play only the meta decks and things like that. I digress. Different game, different problems, but it's different, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know quite how to describe it, but there's no real I don't, is it for fun format? There's none of that.
Well,
basically.
It's not necessarily like just having a for fun format. It's more like just being more relaxed in my perspective. It's just like when I play Digimon at locals, I don't bring my competitive decks. I usually bring the decks, like the super casual decks that I test out for YouTube, just to get some good preliminary games with, to understand the flow and concept of what the deck is trying to do, to see if it even works also. But because I have 0 to gain, like, it lets me do that. But again, some of my other local peeps, they play some of the more meta competitive decks, and like that's just what they have. Like, not everyone's in my type of position where they're just always going to be swapping decks every week, playing something different, testing all the time. I'm in that unique position, but I try to create, when I play, as fun of an environment as I can, because I know there's no stakes in it. There's nothing to gain. There's literally nothing to lose. Some of stores, they try to do a little bit more competitive things, and run like various different events, like a win a case or win a box or whatever. So those That's more on the store doing it instead of Bandai doing it.
Yeah.
Because Bandai, they just give out some very basic pricing, and that's kind of it. They're just like, here's some stuff, just go with it. But it's up to the store to figure out an actual way to incentivize the players rather than the company giving the store the ability to do that.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, that makes sense because it's not like Bandai's really the one sitting there like, or Konami, for example, in the Yu-Gi-Oh's case, is sitting there like, no, y'all can't have fun. No one gets to have fun. Only serious tournaments. There, it really is just the people that are playing in said tournaments that really dictate whether or not they can kind of have a more relaxed environment at locals, or if you're going to have only competitive experiences at locals. Like, example, my locals for Digimon is quite competitive. Nobody really plays for fun decks, unless you're me or my friend Lloyd. We're the only two people that do it. And we still do pretty well, but that's different. We still, I mean, we go there fully expecting to lose. But if other than us two, no one will ever go out of their way to be like, yeah, I'll build blue hybrid right now, or I'll build something that I know is not meta or not very meta defining. Um, what was it? 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I brought Yosman Quartzmon Turbo. That was fun. That was hilarious. I got third place at a 25-man event or 24-man, so it was pretty funny. But other than that, like, no one else is really going out of their way to really try at my locals. So of course, I don't know. I can't. It's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, hard for me to expect anything else from like another local because the two locals I go to are very hyper competitive.
But
So
yeah, but competitive local integrity aside and environment, the thing about all of the other big games, this even includes Flesh and Blood because they are still a pretty big game. Not as big as the big three, but they're trying definitely a lot harder than Digimon is, or Bandai to be more precise. Bandai obviously put a lot of attention into Battle Spirits, but that's a completely different story. And One Piece is doing relatively well as far as I understand. But regardless, the fact that all of the community's complaints is summed up into, like, we just want to play more, shows that they're not doing more. And if we look at what the big three is doing, they're giving their players a ton of opportunities to figure out a way to be competitive and have a path of progression to follow to actually be competitive. And then B, running a butt ton of events. So that way you actually have those avenues to do what you want or need to do based on your own personal interest and investment in the game. And Bandai doesn't really have that. They don't have incentivization for me to go to my locals other than me wanting to. The pricing sucks, and it hasn't been getting better for the regionals. So, like, and if you're not in North America and you don't have that invite as the big incentive, there actually is no reason for you to even play in those. Ultimate Cups, now they're doing wacky side formats to try to shake up the game, which the community is pretty divided on, which I think is fine. It's got good prizing, so there's incentive to play. But again, I'm not making progress towards the big goal of going to nationals. And again, North America is the only place that has that problem where we need an invite for nationals. And now they're trying to shrink and reduce it because their infrastructure can't support large scale things as we've already seen before in the past. So it leads to a situation where we need more events, we want more events, and it leads for them to try to provide it. And the fact that they're not is just leading a lot of player discontention, and a lot of players are not happy with the current state of the game because of that. On top of, like, the meta, but that's neither here nor there. A lot of people are going to be like, yeah, this was the greatest or this was the worst. I, as an example, loved Metal Garurumon meta. I thought it was a fantastic meta, yes, partially because I played it, but because I saw the strengths and the weaknesses and the ways that people can play against it. So it wasn't this nigh unbeatable deck like Beelzemon. It was just a very hard to beat deck, but it still had more options, and there was still plenty of stuff that I was able to top outside of Metal Garurumon. But
Yeah, okay. I mean, I understand. I agree there. I know a lot of people hated that format. And I think more so they just hated how long it was good. Not necessarily the deck itself. It was just one of those, a byproduct of it being there for too long. Not necessarily the deck itself. It could have been that could have been replaced with anything. Um, and I mean, to in a similar vein, like BT8 format. I really enjoyed BT8 format. Not a lot of people did, because it ended up going back into blue hybrid format, basically, after a little bit, even though I personally, I enjoyed playing yellow hybrid. Um, and even that'll automatically turn a lot of people off of me. But I thought the deck was very fun. I thought there was a lot of interesting gameplay decisions that had to be made, at least in comparison to Blue Hybrid, where it really was just control the entire board, make sure they can never actually play the game. So I agree in that aspect that there's always going to be discontent in some way, shape, or form. Someone's going to not like something. Little Timmy's not going to enjoy that Beelzemon destroys him turn 3 every game. But, I mean, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I mean, it's just this format. It might change coming up. I don't think it will, at least for the EX set, but BT13 is going to take a massive shift, and some other big decks are going to come out and actually do quite a bit of work. So, I mean, we're still on the up. I don't think we're really in a downward trend.
I mean, tournament attendance wise for everywhere not North America, it is on the downward trend. And
But I also think that's due to them getting the product very late. Like
sometimes,
they,
yes,
for this
delays.
instance specifically.
Yeah, delays always suck, and they're not always in Bandai's control. Because shipping logistics, it's a field I work in. I know that it like stuff can be really screwy really quickly, and it could just affect things. So that it's just something that happens. But the fact that like they don't have a good path of progression to be a competitive player. There's no real incentive to actually do anything. It is a problem that has been slowly building, and now this year being some of the worst prizing that we've had since the game's launch, it really is showing how bare bones their system is, and the fact that something needs to change if it's going to get better. Otherwise, I don't necessarily see it getting better. But they have plenty of examples and opportunities to be able to grow and improve their organized play structure, and it's really just up to them if they want to or not. And I think that's going to be the big sign, is if they want to. Because I want to play the game. I really want to be as competitive as I possibly can be. I want to celebrate not only just my love for the card game, but my love for the IP, and seeing them make all of the wrong moves really hurts me, but I'm not going to be giving up on it just yet. I'm not going to be giving it up on it, period. But I'm only this unhappy, and I think people are only this unhappy because we love the game and we want it to thrive and we want it to improve. And it just makes it very frustrating when Bandai themselves is kneecapping themselves from its own growth.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there, where um, they have been, at least in the last few, maybe months to a year. I'll probably put like half a year to about a year. downward trend in the way of like prize support and events. That I wholeheartedly agree. But I think the player base is still going up. I think we're still in a upward trend in that regard. And I think this is just a matter of, I mean, these people like Latin America, and I know I have friends in Latin America, and the UK, they were didn't get like the UK didn't get their product till like 2 weeks ago, like last week, actually. So it's like they didn't have much time, and then Latin America, they didn't have a good. They normally don't have good representation anyway. Oceania didn't get their product on time, so it's like they these numbers, of course, look pretty. They look pretty sad. They look pretty harmful. But I think this is just an outlier for some things. And I think we can see that due to the reflection of some of the events, like the Latin America events in particular. But um, I mean, I'm pretty okay. I think I am on the same vein as you, where I just want better. I don't want this game to go away because I love this game, and I think that this game has done a lot of good. Um, it's different. It's done things that the other card games just don't do, and I don't think I would get my fix just about anywhere else. So I want this game to succeed. Um, I loved it very much, and I'm hoping that the discontent of the players is seen. I don't know if that is the case, but I hope it is, and that something lights somewhere in Bandai's eyes or in their spectrum to be like, okay, maybe we need to do some changes around certain departments or something in that regard. It doesn't need to be incredibly drastic because the things we're asking for are not things that are drastic, to be
No,
100%
they were
honest.
things that they took away, and I think that's part of like the big, like a big addition to the discontent is first 2 years, store championships had invites. Now, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they don't. It's like I don't like where did this decision come from and why? Like I know they're not gonna obviously communicate to that with us like we mentioned last week, but it just seemed like such a backwards decision, especially since like they're not giving us the opportunities to make it up. They don't have a good tiered structure in terms of their organized play. And even right now, just sometimes still signing up for events is still kind of a challenge for people just because you have to sign up literally a month in advance or more sometimes. And some players don't have that attention span to pay attention to when the event is. I'm pretty sure with like YCS's and with Pokemon's regionals and Magic's like their championship stuff, I'm pretty sure you don't have to sign up a month in advance to be able to participate in those. And
You do
that's kind
not
of,
for YCSs.
yeah,
I know that for sure.
and that's kind of crazy to think that this is the only one we basically have to pre-order our tournament entries. It's just there's so many small little decisions that are just that could be fixed if they decided to give us more. And it seems like Bandai wants to try to do more, but they also don't want to try to do more at the same time. Like they've always played things very close to their chest, very minimalistic, because that way, if things end up not working out, they didn't invest a whole lot into it. But if things did work out, then they make out even more. So
Yeah,
it's
they
just
make it like a
like,
bandit.
yeah, so they could give us more opportunities. I don't know if that's finding another TO, if that's running more events and talking with the TOs that we currently have to do more events. Like, I don't exactly know 100% where the breakdown is or what they can do, but the answers are out there in terms of how to have a better organized play. And Bandai is not the smallest company in the world where they can't afford it. They're not like the Force of Wills or the Gate Rulers, where they actually are a small dying company and they don't have any infrastructure to be able to have any organized play outside of a Discord server. Like they're not that small. Um,
No, they are not. Not even a little bit.
Like, they could even step up and try to run things themselves if they need to. Like Bushiroad, they do all of the Spring Fests and championships themselves. Like, they don't have a separate TO that does it. And they do it for free. But they don't run a whole lot of them, so that's the catch.
Yeah,
But
the trade-off.
yeah, but they understand that this is a free event, very low stakes, and you're just there to have fun. Like, they at least understand that. And all I want is for Bandai to improve and do better. And we could talk about all of the ways they could improve till we're blue in the face. They do have a survey for BT12 that's currently out. I would highly recommend filling out that survey, so that way they could try to see some of the data and some of the comments to be able to try to improve their game, because they do at least look and listen to some of them. Even though they're slow to act, that's just most companies running through red tape. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not listening. And even just sending them like emails and communicating them with Facebook posts, like, as long as we could be polite on how we respond, hopefully something can change and something can improve. Because at the end of the day, we just want to play this fine, fantastic game and want to have as much fun doing it in as many different ways as Bandai can provide.
Exactly. And just using the right avenues, just getting those messages out, that'll do more than, honestly, a good chunk of what we're doing right now. So
I mean, I hope
it's
Bandai listens to this, but
that would be really cool. But I mean, that's not a pipe dream. Maybe you never know. I mean,
yeah, you never know who's listening.
Exactly. So that's why it's always good to be cordial, courteous, and understand that these are business people at the end of the day. They're there to make money, not necessarily be friends with us. So, but it's never hurts to be on good graces, because then that just leads to more money on the in the longevity of the game itself. So, and he's right. We could go back and forth all night if we really wanted to on how the game can improve, what can be done to improve said things, and yada yada yada. But I think leaving it on that makes the most sense. And if you do that survey, just remember, courteous, clear, show intent. You can be content, but you don't have to be rude.
Yep. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for listening as always. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to help support the podcast and share it with others. The fact that we actually do have a podcast on various social media sites. And if you would also leave us a rating and review on top of a follow or subscribe, depending on your platform of choice, that also helps a lot. So thank you again for everyone who listened, and we will see you again in the next episode.